Alright people, I'm a victim of my own success. Hello, my name is Alex and welcome to the better late than never but also completely unprepared presentation of the Planet3 Center Lock version. So what do you actually get? Now the Sun Gear will consist of two parts. There's the Sun Gear base and there's the Sun Gear splines, or the teeth. The Sun Gear base is flat on the side that should be facing you, or the top side, and on the other side there is a cavity that corresponds to the protrusion of the lock ring. On the other side of the teeth there is the corresponding profile that will be pressed into the lock ring. The rest of the parts are the same as on the 6-bolt version, which is just the planet and the compatible ring gear. Your center lock version of the Planet 3 will be shipped already pressed onto the lock ring. This is intentional and I'm forcing you to try and remove it the first time yourself. As you can see, there is a gap built in between the Sun Gear and the lock ring. This is so that you can take a knife. A butter knife, everyone has one, and you will insert it between the lock ring and the bottom of the Sun Gear, okay, like this. And then this is the motion that we're aiming for, okay. You will not do this to try and get it off. You will insert and then do this, okay. So insert and then just hold the Sun Gear, okay, and then move on slightly. Okay, and it falls out with some drama, okay? And that's it. I will press fit this the first time so that it goes through the plastic deformation here, and then it will be very nice and easy to remove every other time. Even though there's a variety of lock rings which are compatible with center lock rotors, they all pretty much come down to the same thing. If you have the ones that are with the external splines, they are taken off with a tool like this. This is basically a bottom bracket tool for Shimano Hollowtech or SRAM GXP or any other compatible bottom bracket. My recommendation would be to aim to get a tool that is deep enough. Okay, so the distance from this edge, which sits against the rotor, all the way to the inside has to be more than, let's say, 15 millimeters. Otherwise this surface will crash into the hub end cap and you will not be able to even grab these splines with these splines. I have made a mistake by ordering a tool like this. As you can see, this surface is just 12 millimeters away from here, and then there's literally 2 or 3 millimeters missing. So get a deeper one. This one is made by Mighty and it costs 8 to 10 euros depending on where you order it from, or up to $12. Your bike also may feature a magnet already attached to the lock ring. In this case the lock ring would be specially made for the bike, such as the specialized Creo SL. In this case, the lock ring will almost certainly have these kind of splines, which are grabbed by the cassette tool. The cassette tool looks something like this. I would also suggest getting one with a guided pin, even though this does not go into the QR axle anymore. Another important thing to note is to please get tools that have a 1/2 inch socket on the other side. Usually they have a 24 millimeter hex nut on the other side, but some are also made with the 1/2 inch socket. This is a great idea because then you can insert a torque wrench into the corresponding socket and use this to tighten the lock ring to 40 Newton meters. This is very important, so please just get a torque wrench, okay? This is like a big one and it costs 50 euros. You have a bike that's worth 10,000 euros. So just buy this. This is not optional anymore, okay? I'm putting my foot down. I'm sorry, before we move on, a note on lock rings. Shimano has two lock rings. They have the SMRT 30 or 70 and they have the SMRT 81. This one is made of aluminum and this one is made out of steel. I will of course be providing you with the steel one, okay? Because these are different. If I align them like this, let's try to do this quickly. Okay, with the bottoms touching, you can see that the right one is almost 1 millimeter taller. Well, it's exactly 1 millimeter taller than the left one. This top spline right here, okay, because it's made out of shit material, which is aluminum, and this one is made out of steel. So they have to use more of it. Otherwise, there's a chance you would be stripping these little splines with your cassette tool. So the primary reason for using this one is that it saves 1 millimeter in the axial direction for the Planet 3. Okay, so when you fit the whole device together on top like this, it grows in thickness and then it can crash into your frame. So that's the primary reason. You can potentially use an aluminum one if you have one, but I would suggest not, because these splines actually measure slightly tighter on this one than on this one. So when you press fit the Planet 3 inside of this one, you might have trouble getting it out and you might break it. The other reason is that the steel one is actually magnetic. Okay, so if something happens to your ring gear and it, let's say, gets crushed by a branch or falls off the bike or whatever, and you have the Sun Gear left on top of your lock ring, you can just leave the magnet in place and it will rotate with the wheel in a 1-to-1 ratio and you can still get home. Your sensor will be picking it up. The bike just will be restricted as it usually is. Okay? So please use this lock ring because steel is less likely to strip and it's magnetic. The first step of the installation onto a center lock hub will be to check if your hub end cap is full of grease. Because there is nothing that makes a bike mechanic happier than putting grease where the grease does not need to be. I would suggest taking a piece of like a paper towel or toilet paper or whatever, spraying it with some brake cleaner, and then wiping the hub end cap completely dry. Because the ring gear of the Planet 3 is going to have to hold onto this via press fit, and that will not work if it's full of grease. Also, if this was full of grease, your dropout on the frame is also filled with grease, so go wipe that too. Now that that's all dry and clean, you will grab your appropriate socket and tool to remove the lock ring. If you're using the bottom bracket tool, please make sure this is seated completely against the rotor and hold your tool with one hand over here. Okay, I have already loosened this, but just to demonstrate, you will do this. If you have a tool that's wobbling like this, it can skip and you will kind of ruin your splines. Then you can just remove your lock ring by hand. Now, it does not matter which rotor you have on the bike. It can be this expensive XT rotor, it can be just a regular SM10, which is on the Specialized Vado, it can be the new goddamn XTR, whatever, costs $1 million rotor. It does not matter for the Planet 3 because the Planet 3 is going to be held on the lock ring, and I provide the lock ring. So, the rotor basically stays in place. Then you will grab your new lock ring and tighten the rotor. But let's say before we get into that, a note on DT Swiss, because this guide is aimed mostly at people with the specialized Creo SL, which has a Roval or a DT Swiss hub, depending on the model, but both are basically DT Swiss because Roval is just a rebrand. All DT Swiss hubs have an end cap, which is notoriously easy to get out because it's held just by a single O-ring. So you can just pop it off like this. Now that will pose a problem later on. If you have to remove the Planet 3, then you will have to keep the lock ring in place. So you can just pop it back on. Now we will screw this back down with the appropriate lock ring. And now you will need your cassette tool. Okay, I will just tighten this by hand, but at this point you would use your torque wrench, pop it in. Again, keep your hand here, but don't grab the head of the wrench and hold it near the body, because that will completely defeat the purpose. Okay, and then you will tighten this to 40 Newton meters until the torque wrench clicks. Now you can take your Planetary Sun Gear, and remember, the face with the cavity goes down. Okay, you can't really install it wrong. The flat face, the smooth and flat face, goes up. You will insert the Sun Gear splines through the Sun Gear, and then the whole thing pops here. Then you will start rotating until you feel the splines engage with the splines of the lock ring, and then you can help yourself by using the same tool. Just insert it and then use the tool so you can distribute equal pressure to the Sun Gear. You can literally press this down with your whole palm and watch it go in. Okay? Until your palm hurts right here. Then it's time to verify that it's correct. The Sun Gear can have a small amount, as you can see. Maybe I will just try to zoom in slightly. Okay, it has like 1/10 of a millimeter of play, which is completely normal, but it should not have play in this direction. It should not be able to go up and down. So check this. Verify, press it once more, and that's the Sun Gear installed. One more thing to do after you have installed the Sun Gear is to try and turn the end cap. Okay, it should be turning just as smoothly as it was before. If there is any sound of scraping on the plastic, that means there is like a little protrusion or some defect during 3D printing here, because the gap is very, very small, but that will wear itself out over time. Absolutely no sound of scraping plastic on plastic. Now you will take your Planet, and with the visible face of the magnet facing you, just pop it onto the Sun Gear. Make sure that it's engaged with the splines of the Sun Gear. But because the lock ring is magnetic, that should happen automatically. You can try to push it all around to see if there's any resistance anywhere, but there shouldn't be. And now we get to the tricky part, and that is the installation of the ring gear. It's not actually that tricky, but it's very important, so please pay attention and do it exactly as I do. Okay? You will grab the ring gear, place it on top of the hub end cap, and then you will overlap both with your thumbs. Okay? So half of the thumb is on this raised bevel edge and half is on the lock ring, or on the end cap itself. And then you will press. Then you can slightly rotate and then press again until you hear it seat. Okay? And now once it has seated, we need to push it down. And now we come to the tricky part, which is the proper installation depth. For this, I will just change the angle of the camera and be right back. And we're back. What's the idea here? The proper installation depth of the Planet 3 ring gear for the center lock version is the same as for the 6-bolt. We have to align this edge of the ring gear, the visible one, this one right here, with the lower visible edge of the Sun Gear. The pushing needs to happen on this raised bevel edge that's right around the end cap. You do not push the device on the sides, okay? You push in the middle, right here. I would place my fingers like this, with the forefinger being right in this concave part of the raised bevel, and then push only that one side. You are looking here. Do not look at the center here, because you're not going to be able to see it. And please get some kind of a white background or even the floor in the background. Push down slightly all around until it starts to go down. And then look at this edge here. Okay? That's almost good, but not yet. But you can see this is up in the air. So I will rotate and then again push down in the same spot, and then rotate again, push down in the same spot, rotate again, and just repeat until you get around the whole circumference, and you can just barely, maybe just barely see that edge below. And this is the level of sound that the planet makes when it's going around. Now I'm going to push this too deep on purpose just to demonstrate. Okay, that's not a normal level of sound. And now we come to the fun part, pulling the ring gear back. Okay, so the press fit is actually quite strong. So when I try to pull this out, you just grab it by the external edge, but if you put your fingers underneath, please make sure not to catch the sun gear. It's not our idea to pull the sun gear off. So just grab the external edges and you see that the end cap itself actually came out. So push the end cap back, hold with your other hand or your one finger here, and then grab it. And this is the motion that we want. We want not so gentle pulling, and we want to wiggle it back and forth. So hold the end cap and wiggle, and maybe rotate slightly and then wiggle again. Oh, that's really tight. That's what he said. Okay. I have managed to pull this up all around, enough to reset the proper installation depth. So the same procedure. Okay, just push right here. I mean here, but we are looking at here. Okay, and rotate, and push, and rotate, push. And that's it. As you rotate this, the ring gear should not wobble up and down. And that's great. Damn, I'm so good at this. It's like I've done it like 700 times so far. Specialized Creo owners need to perform one additional step, which is to slightly reposition the speed sensor at the rear dropout, which is in the chainstay. As you can see in this image, it's held by a single screw. You will unscrew this using an appropriate Allen key, which is probably a 2mm or a 2.5, and then pull the sensor towards the axle, towards the rear, by 3 to 5mm. This will ensure that the speed sensor is reliably triggered by the magnet inside the Planet3. Now I will demonstrate just placing the rear wheel into just a cube bike that I have laying around. If you have a SRAM derailleur on the bike, it would be a great idea to use this little lock button that it has here to extend the derailleur cage forward and lock it in place. This will allow you to completely bypass the chain for the first installation, where we would like to verify the amount of sound that the Planet3 makes. So you will just take the rear wheel and aim it into the disc. Also, be careful not to hit the ring gear onto the frame during the installation. This can move it just slightly and ruin our proper installation depth. So, very carefully, just pop it in. Now you will take your axle, place it inside the dropout, and start tightening. As you approach the snug point on the axle, right when you feel the first resistance, I would like you to spin the wheel just lightly by hand. This is the amount of sound that the planet makes traveling around the Sun Gear. Okay, it's audible only in living room conditions, and as soon as you are on the road or on the trail, it will be absolutely quiet. Just as an example, if I press the ring gear slightly on the external edge, which will just elastically deform it, this is the sound of it scraping on the Sun Gear. And now it's back to normal. We are doing this step basically because I have noticed that on some frames, if there is a welded joint here, which joins the seat stay and the chain stay parts of the frame, this can be slightly out of tolerance, and then it can be pushing on this raised bevel edge of the ring gear clamps that are held onto the hub end cap. If that happens, it will just compress the whole device together in the axial direction, causing friction and sound. So as long as this step is very quiet, you can unscrew the axle, reset your chain around the cassette, and then you're good to go. Take a torque wrench, set it to the manufacturer's recommendation or whatever is written on the axle. This one is 15 Newton meters. And then tighten in one swoop motion, okay, until it clicks. Then just reset your derailleur cage. And that's it. You have successfully installed a Planet 3 Center Lock version. Congrats.